Hello, Mr. Bulk. Thank you for having an interview with us. You are analyzing in tech stocks, so I believe you've been very busy lately with all the interest in tech stock, I think.
Yes, absolutely. So thank you for the invitation, first of all. We cover at New Street the entire technology value chain. So everything that ranges from semi-cap equipment companies like ASML, Applied Materials, to TSMC, Samsung, Hynix, and all the way down to chip designers like Nvidia, AMD, and companies using those chips in products such as Tesla and Apple. So we look at the entire technology value chain.
So my first question is, the Nvidia's investor favorite GTC conference has started. So what was the most notable takeaways in your opinion?
First of all, it was really a hallmark event. The attendance was enormous. The excitement around it was incomparable to what I've seen in previous years. I remember visiting GTC conferences, 5, 6, 7 years ago, and attendance back then was not at all at the same level compared to what we see this time around. So that is really a testimony, I think, to NVIDIA's ecosystem, but also the whole buzz around AI. When it comes to investment implications, there's two things that I wanted to highlight. First of all, NVIDIA's competitiveness when it comes to chip performance is only getting stronger. The new architecture that they announced called Blackwell, so that is a successor to Hopper, and Blackwell offers 2.5 times higher training speeds at a similar level of accuracy, and up to 5 times higher inference performance. So inference means, for instance, when you use ChatGPT, that prompt generates an inference query. That higher performance, 2.5 to 5 times, shows that despite the fact that Moore's law, which is the shrink of transistor sizes, that has slowed down notably, but NVIDIA still manages to extract a lot of incremental performance out of its chips. So that is one, that NVIDIA's competitiveness is only getting stronger. Now, secondly, NVIDIA is increasingly positioning itself as a system-level company. They are not just a GPU vendor. Jensen Huang, the CEO of NVIDIA, in his keynote, he showed a system that consists of 72 GPUs, graphic process units, and interconnected switching chips, so chips that connect all of those GPUs together.
Yeah,
and that
he even showed it to us.
Yes, exactly. He showed it, and it shows it results in a supercomputer that is able to train the latest AI models with 4 times less GPUs and 4 times lower power than the previous generation. And the secret sauce there is really the networking.
Yeah, but after the Jensen Huang's keynote speech, the Nvidia stock price didn't react that much. So, why do you think that was?
Typically with those type of events, the excitement for investors going into it drives up the stock price, but then the actual event itself, often a case of what is known as buy the rumor, sell the news. So the stock goes up into the event, and at the event itself, it's flat or it declines a bit. Now, these are market dynamics around trading of the stock.
The biggest debate among the investors surrounding NVIDIA is whether the company is overvalued or not. So what's your opinion on this matter?
It's really the $1 trillion question that you asked.
Yeah, it is.
What is NVIDIA stock going to do? And I think it all comes down at the end of the day to how artificial intelligence is going to proliferate. So it's going to expand in the coming years. And what we recently did in a piece of research is that we laid out 3 different scenarios. So scenario 1, AI spending is going to continue to increase and grow from less than 45 billion last year to around 400 billion in 2027. A second scenario is slower growth to 200 billion in 2027. And the last scenario that we cannot completely discard is a so-called AI winter. Spending grows to 120 billion and flatlines after that. Now, NVIDIA in that first scenario, the 400 billion scenario, is still a strong buy in our view. We think that in that scenario, the stock could trade at around $2,500 in 2026. Now, in that middle scenario of soft adoption, upside is much more limited. We would say that the stock is around fairly valued at this point. And in AI winter scenario, we do see downside risk to Nvidia's current stock price. So we need to keep a very close eye on how those models and services that you read about today, ChatGPT, Gemini, etc., how those models are going to drive real world traction. Will we see increased uptake of co-pilot services? Will we see more advanced Gen AI driven advertisements? Are we going to see AI being deployed in healthcare?
Mhm.
It really depends on adoption in the real world.
I wonder what drives the differences between those like three scenarios. Like, do you have any factors that drives those future scenarios?
The way that we think about it is that today demand for 2024 and 2025 is probably secure. Companies have only recently started to roll out those services. They have their roadmaps in place. So the near term, so this year and next, you should see a steady trend up. But after that, what we need to see is for adoption to really translate into tangible business momentum. So that means that enterprises, large enterprises, need to make AI a daily part of the routine of the employees. You and I need to start using AI on our smartphones, much more than the occasional ChatGPT question. It needs to become part of daily routine, both in the lives of consumers and in the lives of enterprises. That is something on which today it's very difficult to have strong conviction on that materializing or not. Either could happen. And I think anyone claiming that they have, accurate visibility on how that is going to play out is probably overestimating their abilities to see the future a bit. It's very challenging. But what we do know is that the coming 1.5 years should be secure. But after that, it becomes a lot murkier.
What drives Nvidia's stock price right now is really huge demand for the semiconductor that they made. So how long this oversupply last? Maybe it can be different to what you expected, those three scenarios.
Yes, as I just mentioned, I think the make or break year is really 2026. For 2024, both demand and supply have limited room to move. TSMC's ability to supply Nvidia is capped to some degree. So in the near term, there's very limited room for that revenue trend to either disappoint or to surprise on the upside. But to your point, beyond that, I would expect that in 2026, revenues are going to trend in between that 200 billion trend and that 400 billion trend. And where exactly it's going to fall, that remains to be seen. And I would consider that last scenario that I laid out, AI winter scenario, to be currently, I don't see any indication of that materializing, but we can't completely disregard it. So it is good to keep in mind.
Which company can be the potential competitors to Nvidia, you think?
It's a good question. And the number one competitor of Nvidia is AMD. AMD has successfully carved a very sustainable position in the CPU market. They've carved that away from Intel, who was the incumbent in that market. They've been very successful over the last 5 years. And they're now trying to do the same with NVIDIA for data center GPUs. So AMD is the number one competitor. Secondly, you have all of the big CSPs, the cloud service providers, companies such as Google, Amazon, Microsoft. These companies try to develop their in-house architectures. So chips that they design in-house without the help of an AMD or an NVIDIA. Google is most successful in that development. They have a chip called the TPU, the Tensor Processing Unit. And I believe they're at the 5th generation of that chip already. But all of the big tech companies try to develop their own chips to reduce their dependence on NVIDIA. And also keep in mind that GPUs are very expensive. So developing your own chips will save you a lot of money.
Yeah, but despite the company names that you gave us, NVIDIA has no immediate competitors. That's what market think, I think. So why aren't they able to steal the demand from the NVIDIA just right now?
So when it comes to AMD, the big difference between AMD and NVIDIA is that NVIDIA has an unparalleled ecosystem. Ecosystem is a bit of a buzzword in tech, but in NVIDIA's case, it is quite tangible. They have their CUDA software, which is the industry standard. So there's enormous amounts of engineers and developers trained on that particular software, with a very wide community supporting new companies that want to use NVIDIA's GPUs. So On top of that, Nvidia is enhancing that ecosystem position by pushing more into a system-level offering, integrated GPUs, CPUs, networking, software elements. By offering all of those elements in a combined system, Nvidia hopes to demonstrate that such a system-level approach is superior versus buying those standalone components and integrating them yourself. If that is the case, then competing becomes increasingly difficult for AMD because they would also have to deliver such a system-level approach, and that is very challenging. So that's AMD. Now, when it comes to those in-house chips like TPUs and of Google and similar chips, the big difference here is that GPUs, because of the way that the architecture is structured, offer a lot of flexibility and programmability. That means that in particular in inference, so using the chip for queries of actual users, that flexibility is very important because you don't know exactly how the inference workloads are going to shift, are going to look like over the coming years. The GPUs are very well suited for inference, and inference is going to increasingly become a larger share of the market as AI services ramp in the real world. So there, GPUs still have a notable advantage. So yes, that is really the bottom line, that first of all, Nvidia has an unparalleled ecosystem. And second of all, when you compare the technology, GPUs versus specialized chips, the flexibility is very important and should ensure that GPUs and Nvidia remain a market leader in the segment.
Yeah, as you said, like they are not real big threat to Nvidia just right now, but do you think they can be in the future? And if so, how long it will take?
I do expect that AMD and also these in-house architectures, that they will continue to grow over the coming years. In the case of AMD, it is in everyone's benefit to have a good second source. It keeps NVIDIA honest in terms of pricing. And that is something that we see across the technology value chain, that customers are very interested to dual source the key technologies that they acquire. What I would expect is for AMD's market share in GPUs to trend between 10 to 30% in the data center. Currently, it's closer to 5%. I would not expect it to exceed that number. And 30% would be a huge success for AMD, but it would still leave 70% for NVIDIA, which is a very sizable market, considering that those 200 to 400 billion figures that I mentioned earlier. So competition will thrive as long as demand is strong today. But even in the long term, I do expect NVIDIA to remain the number one company in this market.
And then beside those competitors, what do you think the biggest risk of investing in NVIDIA?
I think the biggest risk here is a lack of real world adoption and monetization of AI. Ultimately, the industry today is spending hundreds of billions of dollars on those chips. That is a lot of money, even for Google and even for Microsoft and Amazon. So ultimately, those hundreds of billions need to translate into something tangible revenues. And we need to see that materialize sooner rather than later.
It is quite important, I think, that AI to have a tangible real world impact, like revenue and everything. I think the market right now believes that AI will improve the enterprise productivity and everything, but we don't know what exactly where to look for the productive gains. So could you give our viewers some examples of industries leveraging AI today?
It's a great question, since this is at the end of the day, it's really about adoption, as I mentioned. So there's a great recent data point of a company called Klarna. That's a fintech from Europe. They have a payment service for consumers. Now, Klarna increasingly has been replacing its human call center operators with Gen AI agents. And as a result, it has realized millions of dollars. I believe it's $40 million of cost savings, with very good feedback of its customers as well. Now, we estimate that the cost of a Gen AI bot is around 6 times less than a human today. And considering that call center revenues globally for the industry as a whole are around 200 billion, that is really a market that is set to be disrupted by Gen AI deployment, and a very tangible proof point of AI being used today and probably increasingly going to be used over the coming few years.
So do you think in Google, Amazon, and all the tech companies can like make AI into like tangible revenues in near future?
I think increasingly, yes, it will. This is one of those things where it really depends on the use case. So call centers, that's absolutely given. Using Gen AI in some form of office communication or in your emails, in your note taking, live transcription of events, all of that, all of those use cases are very self-evident. But at the end of the day, it needs to be, users are very set in their ways. So it depends on eventually on users' willingness to move away from processes that they're comfortable with towards something new. And we'll have to see how that plays out. It's not so much a question of technology, but more of human behavior and adopting technology that they're not familiar with.
Yeah, because, well, I'll try to like giving a like negative view here, but like that sounds like all the note taking and like the kind of AI stuff you mentioned. It can help people, but I can't imagine that it can actually turn into like tangible revenue for the company. So
there would be value, I think, to having a personalized AI agent that can guide you through your daily life in many ways, in particular when it comes to professional life. But keep in mind that beyond that, there's also services such as, for instance, drugs discovery in healthcare, weather prediction, those type of large industries that where very clearly AI can play a major role and is increasingly being adopted already.
Yeah, my next question is, which company beside Nvidia, like you mentioned several names right just before, but other companies besides Nvidia stand to benefit from the increased AI investment?
Yes, there's a wide range of companies that benefit either directly or indirectly. So I'll list the main categories. One very clearly is memory makers. SK Hynix,
Like Samsung,
Samsung, absolutely.
Micron, yeah.
Those are companies that will absolutely benefit because AI and GPUs require a lot of what is known as high bandwidth memory, HBM. Now, SK Hynix is currently dominant in that market, and Samsung and Micron are trying to establish their position. We expect that over time, all three of those manufacturers will capture their fair share of this market. So that is one of the main markets with exposure to AI. Now, second of all, networking companies such as Broadcom, Arista, those are companies that enable all of those chips, all of those GPUs to be connected to one another, which is very important when it comes to training and also inference. And the last category that I wanted to highlight is the manufacturers of those actual chips. And TSMC really stands out there. Now, TSMC, a Taiwanese company, all of the chips that you see, whether they're NVIDIA's or AMD's or Google's TPUs, they are made by TSMC. TSMC is multiple, so its valuation is not nearly as high as that of, for instance, NVIDIA or AMD. And that makes TSMC one of our preferred names to gain exposure to the AI team for investors.
Yeah, thank you for sharing your insight with me and our viewers.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks for that.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks for having me.